The crimson star of Vexthera cast long shadows across the crystalline spires of the Galactic Council chambers. In the highest tower, where the most powerful beings in known space gathered to shape the destiny of trillions, a meeting was taking place that would forever alter the balance of the universe. Zarketh the Destroyer lounged in his massive chair, his 6 arms casually draped over the armrests as he surveyed the trembling delegates before him. Standing nearly 12 feet tall, his chitinous exoskeleton gleamed like polished obsidian under the chamber's harsh lighting. For eyes, each the size of a human fist, tracked the nervous movements of the various alien representatives with predatory interest. For 300 cycles, Zarketh had been the undisputed apex predator of the galaxy. His species, the Velthak, had evolved on a death world where everything from the smallest insect to the largest beast was designed to kill. They had clawed their way to the top of their food chain through pure savagery, and when they reached the stars, they brought that same merciless efficiency with them. The tribute from the Centauri colonies is acceptable, Zarketh rumbled, his voice like grinding stone. However, the humans have been problematic. A murmur of unease rippled through the chamber. The Velthak had conquered 97 species in their relentless expansion across the galaxy. Each had fallen within months, some within weeks. The humans have been fighting them for over 2 years now, and somehow, impossibly, they were still standing. Ambassador Felterra of the Zephyrian Collective cleared her throat nervously. Great Destroyer, perhaps we could discuss alternative approaches to the human problem. They're a young species, barely 1,000 years into space travel. Surely they could be negotiated with. Zarketh's mandibles clicked in what passed for laughter among his kind. Negotiated with? Little bird, do you know what happened to the last delegation I sent to their home world? The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew the story, but none dared speak it aloud. They sent them back, Zarketh continued, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. In pieces, with a message carved into the chitin of my finest warrior. Come and take it. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. The Destroyer's reputation was built on overwhelming force and absolute dominance. No species had ever dared to openly mock him before the humans came along. But that is not why I've called you here today, Zarketh said, rising from his chair to his full, imposing height. I have received intelligence that changes everything. The humans have developed something they call Project Prometheus. My spies tell me it is a weapon unlike anything the galaxy has ever seen. General Morvac of the Titan Defense Corps leaned forward in his chair. The massive, stone-like being had been one of Zarketh's most trusted lieutenants for over 50 years. What kind of weapon, my lord? That, Zarketh said with a predatory smile that revealed rows of razor-sharp teeth, is what we are going to find out. I'm calling for full mobilization of the fleet. Every ship, every warrior, every weapon in my arsenal will converge on the Sol system. This time, we end the human problem once and for all. The delegates exchanged worried glances. A full mobilization hadn't been called since the conquest of the Andromedan Empire 2 centuries ago. That campaign had resulted in the complete extinction of an entire species. Is such a massive force truly necessary? Asked Counselor Ythera of the Nebulous Syndicate, her translucent form shimmering nervously. The humans have perhaps a few hundred ships at most. Your fleet numbers in the thousands. You underestimate them, Zarketh growled. As I once did. When this war began, I sent a small strike force to crush them quickly. They destroyed it. I sent a larger fleet. It barely escaped with half its ships. Every engagement has cost me more than it should. The humans fight like cornered animals, but with the intelligence to make it hurt. He began pacing the chamber, his clawed feet clicking against the crystalline floor. They have no honor, no concept of surrender. They use tactics that would make even the most savage predator sick. They strap bombs to their own ships and ram them into mine. They hide weapons in civilian vessels and use distress calls to lure my captains into traps. They have turned warfare into an art form of creative destruction. The assembled delegates listened with growing unease. The destroyer's tone held something none of them had ever heard before. respect for an enemy. But, worst of all, Zarketh continued, they learn. Every battle, they adapt. They study our tactics, our technology, our weaknesses. What worked against them once never works again. They are becoming more dangerous with each passing day. Ambassador Felterra dared to speak again. Then, perhaps, Great Destroyer, it would be wise to seek peace while we still can. The silence that followed was deafening. Zarketh slowly turned to face the Zephyrian delegate, all four of his eyes fixed on her with lethal intensity. Peace. The word dripped with venom. There can be no peace with a species that refuses to know its place. The humans must be taught the same lesson every other race has learned, that I am the apex predator, and they are prey. If I allow them to define me, others will think they can do the same. The order I have built will crumble. He strode over to a massive holographic display that dominated one wall of the chamber. With a gesture, it lit up to show the galaxy, with thousands of red dots marking Velthak Holdings and a small blue speck representing human space. Behold the empire I have built through strength and fear. 900 systems, quadrillion of souls under my rule, all of it maintained by the understanding that I cannot be defeated, that resistance is futile. The humans threaten that understanding simply by continuing to exist. General Morvac nodded grimly. The warriors grow restless, my lord. They whisper that perhaps the Great Destroyer is losing his edge. Some even dare to suggest that the humans might actually win. A low growl rumbled from Zarketh's throat. Then they will see exactly why I am called the Destroyer. When my fleet darkens the skies above Earth, when their cities burn and their warriors fall, the galaxy will remember who rules here. He turned back to the assembled delegates, his presence filling the chamber like a physical weight. You will return to your worlds and prepare your fleets for integration into mine. Every ship, every weapon, every warrior. We gather at the Veil Nebula in one standard month. From there, we will launch the greatest armada in galactic history. My lord, Council Ithera ventured carefully. Was there Project Prometheus? Should we not wait to learn more about it? Let them have their secret weapon, Zarketh said dismissively. I have face planet killers, reality warping devices, and weapons that could tear holes in space itself. Nothing they can build will save them from the storm that is coming. As the delegates began filing out of the chamber, each lost in their own thoughts about the coming war, none noticed the small maintenance drone that had been silently observing from the shadows. Its sensors had recorded every word, every gesture, every detail of the meeting. Deep in the bowels of the station, the drone plugged itself into a hidden communication array. The message it transmitted was brief and encrypted. Package confirmed. Gathering storm. Prometheus green light. Raven. The message traveled through quantum tunnels and hidden relays, bouncing off asteroids and derelict ships, following a path so complex that even the Velthak's sophisticated surveillance network couldn't trace it. Eventually, it reached its destination, a nondescript cargo hauler drifting in the emptiness between stars. Aboard the ship, a figure in dark clothing pulled back her hood, revealing the face of a human woman. Sarah Chun had been operating behind enemy lines for over a year, slowly working her way into the Velthak intelligence network. Getting access to the Galactic Council chambers had taken months of careful planning and several bribes that had cost Earth most of its remaining platinum reserves. She studied the message on her screen, then activated her quantum communicator. Control, this is Raven. Package confirmed. The Destroyer is mobilizing his entire fleet for a final assault on Sol System. ETA, 30 standard days. The response came back immediately. Copy, Raven. Prometheus status. Unknown. I haven't been able to penetrate their research facilities. But whatever it is, Command better hope it's ready. This isn't going to be another skirmish. This is total war. Sarah deleted the message and began preparing for the next phase of her mission. Getting information to Earth was only half the job. The other half was what she'd been trained for since childhood, what every human military academy now taught as core curriculum: assassination. The Velthak believed they were apex predators because they were bigger, stronger, and more savage than anything they'd encountered. They had never learned to fear the kind of predator that humans had evolved to be, the kind that used tools, planned ahead, and struck from the shadows. As her ship began its long journey toward the Sol system, Sarah smiled grimly. Zarketh was about to discover that there was something in the galaxy more dangerous than an apex predator. There was a human with nothing left to lose. Meanwhile, in the depths of Earth's moon, Project Prometheus was entering its final phase. Dr. Marcus Webb stood before a device that defied easy description. It looked like a crystalline sphere suspended in a web of quantum field generators, pulsing with an energy that seemed to bend light around it. "Sir," his assistant called out, "we're getting reports from the outer colonies. Velthak fleet movements are increasing across the board. It looks like they're preparing for something big." Marcus nodded grimly. "How long until Prometheus is operational?" 72 hours, assuming no setbacks. "Make it 48. I have a feeling we're going to need every advantage we can get." As the countdown to humanity's greatest test began, neither side truly understood what was coming. The Velthak saw it as a final hunt, the crushing of an annoying prey species. The humans saw it as their last stand, a desperate gamble with the survival of their entire species at stake. But deep in the quantum foam that underlies reality itself, something else was stirring. Something that had been sleeping since the universe was young, waiting for the right combination of will, technology, and desperation to wake it up. The galaxy was about to learn that the deadliest predator wasn't the one with the biggest claws or the loudest roar. It was the one that refused to die. The void between the stars had never seen anything like it. Stretched across nearly a light year of space, the Velthak Armada assembled like a gathering storm. 60,000 warships of every class imaginable, from sleek destroyers to massive dreadnoughts that could crack planets. At the center of this vast formation, Zarketh's flagship, Endless Hunger, dwarfed everything around it, a mobile fortress the size of a small moon. Admiral Torres floated in the zero-gravity command center of the human battleship Defiance, watching the tactical display with grim fascination. 3 weeks had passed since Sarah Chen's warning reached Earth, and humanity had spent every moment preparing for what everyone knew would be their final battle. "How many?" asked Captain Rodriguez, Torres' longtime friend and the ship's commander. "Intelligence estimates between 50 and 70,000 vessels," Torres replied, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they faced. "The largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history. And us. 437 ships. Every vessel humanity could put into space, including converted cargo haulers with missile pods strapped to their hulls." The mathematics were brutal. Even with their technological advantages, humanity was outnumbered more than 100 to 1. In any conventional engagement, they would be swept aside like dust before a hurricane. But this wouldn't be a conventional engagement. "Status on Prometheus?" Torres asked. "Dr. Webb reports the device is ready for deployment," Rodriguez answered. "Whatever it does, he seems confident it will make a difference." Torres nodded, though privately she harbored doubts. She'd seen the classified reports, knew that Prometheus had cost more resources than the rest of Earth's military budget combined. But she also knew that Dr. Webb and his team had been working in complete secrecy for over a year. Even she didn't know exactly what they had built. "Ma'am," called out Lieutenant Chun from the communications station, "we're receiving a transmission from the Velthak flagship. They're demanding our surrender." "Put it through." The main screen flickered to life, showing Zarketh in all his terrifying glory. The destroyer sat on his command throne, surrounded by his officers, and the heads of his most recent victims mounted on spikes. His 4 eyes gleamed with predatory satisfaction. "Humans," he rumbled, his voice carrying across space like the promise of death. "You have fought well for such a young species. I offer you this one chance to save your pathetic lives. Surrender now, and I will allow a breeding population to survive as slaves. Refuse, and I will personally ensure that your species is wiped from existence so completely that future archaeologists will find no trace you ever existed. Torres stepped forward, her jaw set in defiance. Zarketh, I'm Admiral Sophia Torres, commander of the human fleet. I have a counteroffer for you. The destroyer's mandibles clicked in amusement. Oh, and what could you possibly offer me, little prey? Leave our system now, and we'll let you live long enough to regret coming here. The silence that followed was broken only by the chittering laughter of Velthak officers. Zarketh's amusement was so great that he actually stood up from his throne, his massive form filling the screen. Magnificent, he roared. Even facing annihilation, you still have fire. This is why your species has amused me for so long. Very well, Admiral Torres. You will have your glorious last stand. When this is over, I will have your skull mounted in a place of honor. The transmission cut off, leaving the human bridge in tense silence. Well, Rodriguez said dryly, that went about as expected. Torres turned to address her bridge crew. All ships prepare for combat. Activate all defensive systems and begin final approach to Rally Point Alpha. Today we find out what humanity is really made of. Across the Sol system, the human fleet began its dance of preparation. Unlike the massive, intimidating formations of the Velthak Armada, the human ships moved with precision and purpose. Every vessel knew its role. Every crew had trained for this moment since the war began. On the outer edge of human space, automated sensor platforms detected the first wave of Velthak ships entering the system. The enemy was coming in 3 massive formations, designed to overwhelm human defenses through sheer weight of numbers. It was a strategy that had worked on 97 other species. But humanity had spent 2 years learning from every engagement, every defeat, every small victory. They had studied Velthak tactics until they knew them better than the Velthak did themselves, and they had prepared accordingly. First wave entering the asteroid belt, reported the sensor officer. 15,000 ships, moving in standard dominance formation. Torres nodded. Begin Operation Mousetrap. Throughout the asteroid belt, thousands of automated mines activated. But these weren't ordinary explosive devices. Human engineers had spent months hollowing out asteroids and filling them with antimatter charges. When the Velthak ships passed through what appeared to be empty space, the asteroids themselves exploded. The results were spectacular. Entire sections of the enemy formation simply vanished in brilliant flashes of annihilation. Ships that survived the initial blasts found themselves caught in a maze of debris and secondary explosions. But the Velthak adapted quickly. Their second wave spread out, using sensor sweeps to detect the remaining mines. They lost fewer ships, but precious time as they carefully navigated the obstacles. Second wave approaching Mars orbital zone, the tactical officer announced. Activate the satellite grid, Torres ordered. Mars had been evacuated months ago, its entire population relocated to the outer colonies or Earth itself. But the planet hadn't been abandoned. Every satellite, every orbital platform, every piece of space infrastructure had been weaponized. As the Velthak fleet approached, Mars' orbit erupted in a storm of missile fire. The enemy's point defense systems worked frantically to intercept the incoming projectiles, but there were simply too many. Hundreds of Velthak ships died in the crossfire, their shields overwhelmed by the sheer volume of fire. And still they came. By the time the third wave reached Earth's orbital zone, the Velthak had lost nearly 10,000 ships. It should have been a devastating blow. But Zarketh had brought 60,000 vessels to this battle. The losses, while painful, were acceptable. They're moving into final attack formation, Rodriguez reported. All remaining ships concentrating for a direct assault on Earth. Torres took a deep breath. This was the moment everything had been building toward. Signal Dr. Webb. It's time for Prometheus. Deep beneath the lunar surface, Dr. Marcus Webb stood before his life's work. Project Prometheus was the culmination of everything humanity had learned about quantum mechanics, dimensional physics, and the fundamental nature of reality itself. It was also their last hope. "Sir," his assistant called out nervously, "we're reading massive energy signatures from the approaching fleet. Whatever you're going to do, it needs to be now." Webb nodded and placed his hand on the activation console. "For 30 years, I've studied the quantum foam that underlies our universe. I've learned that reality isn't as solid as we thought. It can be influenced, shaped, changed." He pressed the activation sequence. The device that had been humanity's greatest secret began to hum with power. Quantum field generators spun up to impossible energies. The crystalline core at the heart of Prometheus pulsed with light that seemed to exist in more dimensions than human eyes could process. And something answered. In the space between spaces, in the quantum foam that existed beneath the fabric of reality, something vast and ancient stirred. It had been waiting eons for someone to call to it, to offer it a pathway back into the universe of matter and energy. The Velthak fleet was closing on Earth when reality began to change. It started small. Individual ships reported navigation errors as their sensors detected gravitational anomalies that shouldn't exist. Then, space itself began to ripple, like water disturbed by an unseen hand. Zarketh felt it first, his predator's instincts screaming warnings that his rational mind couldn't understand. Something was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. "Report," he roared at his bridge crew. "Sir, we're detecting massive quantum fluctuations throughout the system," his science officer reported, her voice shaking. "The readings don't make sense. It's as if space-time itself is becoming unstable. Increase speed. Get us to Earth before whatever the humans are planning can take effect." But it was already too late. The change swept outward from the moon like an invisible wave. Where it passed, the fundamental laws of physics began to shift. Energy patterns that had been stable for billions of years suddenly became chaotic. Electronic systems that had functioned perfectly began to fail as the quantum principles they relied on changed. And in the depths of space, something that had slept since the universe was young opened its eyes. The first Velthak ships to be affected simply stopped working. Their engines failed, their weapons powered down, their life support systems went dark. But that was just the beginning. As the quantum instability spread, stranger things began to happen. Some ships found their hulls changing, metal flowing like liquid as the atomic bonds holding them together weakened. Others simply faded, becoming translucent as they slipped partially out of normal space-time. Worst of all were the ships that vanished entirely, only to reappear in impossible places, inside asteroids, merged with other vessels, or scattered across space in pieces that should have been connected. "What is this?" Zarketh demanded, his voice carrying a note of something he hadn't felt in centuries: fear. His science officer was frantically working at her console, her claws clicking against the controls. "The humans have done something to the quantum substrate of local space-time. They've destabilized the fundamental forces that hold matter together." "Then get us out of here." "We can't. The effect is spreading faster than we can retreat. It's already encompassed the entire system." On the bridge of the Defiance, Admiral Torres watched in awe as the enemy fleet began to disintegrate. She had known Prometheus was powerful, but seeing it in action was beyond her wildest imagination. "Dr. Webb," she called over the comm, "what exactly did you build?" Webb's voice came back, strained with effort. "I opened a door, Admiral. A door to something that exists outside our normal understanding of physics. Something that can rewrite the rules of reality on a local scale." "How local?" "About a light year in radius. And growing." Torres felt a chill run down her spine. "Doctor, how do we control this thing?" "We don't," Webb replied grimly. "Once awakened, it has its own agenda. All we can do is hope that agenda doesn't include wiping out humanity along with the Velthak." In the chaos of the disintegrating enemy fleet, one figure moved with deadly purpose. Sarah Chun had spent the last 3 weeks infiltrating Zarketh's flagship, disguised as a maintenance worker. She had watched and waited, learning the ship's layout and the destroyer's routines. Now, As reality itself began to come apart around her, she made her move. The corridors of the Endless Hunger were filled with panicking Velthak soldiers as systems failed throughout the massive vessel. In the confusion, no one paid attention to a single maintenance worker making her way toward the command deck. Sarah had trained for this moment her entire adult life. She carried with her humanity's most advanced weapon, not a gun or a blade, but something far more sophisticated. The quantum disruptor in her hand was no larger than a pin, but it could unweave the atomic bonds of any target it was pointed at. As she reached the command deck, she could hear Zarketh's voice roaring orders at his terrified crew. The door guards were distracted by the chaos, making it almost too easy to slip past them. The destroyer stood at the center of his bridge, his massive form dominating the space as he tried to regain control of the situation. His back was to the door, his attention focused on the tactical displays showing his fleet's dissolution. Sarah raised the disruptor, aimed it at the base of Zarketh's skull where his brain stem would be, and prepared to fire. But as her finger tightened on the trigger, something impossible happened. Zarketh turned around and smiled. "Hello, Sarah Chun," Zarketh said, his voice carrying an unnatural calm despite the chaos erupting around them. "I have been waiting for you." Sarah's blood ran cold. Her cover had been perfect, her infiltration flawless. There was no way the destroyer should have known her identity, let alone been expecting her. "You seem surprised," Zarketh continued, stepping closer. "Did you really think I had survived 3 centuries of warfare without learning to detect assassins? The moment you set foot on my ship, I knew exactly what you were." The quantum disruptor remained trained on the massive alien center mass, but Sarah's mind was racing. Something was wrong beyond just her blown cover. The destroyer was too calm, too collected for someone whose fleet was being systematically destroyed by forces beyond comprehension. "Then why am I still alive?" she asked, her finger hovering over the trigger. "Because I need you to deliver a message," Zarketh replied. "Your species has impressed me more than any other. You fight with honor despite your lack of physical prowess. You adapt and learn from every encounter. Most importantly, you never surrender, even when faced with impossible odds." Around them, the bridge crew continued their desperate attempts to regain control of the ship. But Zarketh ignored them completely, his attention focused solely on the human assassin before him. "The message," Sarah prompted. "Tell your leaders that they have awakened something that will destroy us all. Your Prometheus device has torn a hole in reality itself, and what has come through is not your ally. It is a predator that makes me look like a harmless scavenger." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" Zarketh gestured toward the view screen, where the quantum distortion was spreading through space like ripples in a pond. But now Sarah could see something else within the distortion, something vast and dark that moved with purposeful intelligence. 3 billion years ago, when the universe was young, there existed beings of pure energy and malevolent will. They fed on suffering, on chaos, on the collapse of ordered reality. The younger species called them the Devourers, and they very nearly consumed all existence before they were banished to the quantum foam that underlies our universe. The ship shuddered as another wave of distortion passed through it. Emergency lighting flickered on as the main power systems failed. "Your Dr. Webb thought he was creating a weapon to change local physics," Zarketh continued. "What he actually did was provide a pathway for something that has been waiting eons for a chance to return." Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the failing environmental systems. "You're lying. This is some kind of trick. Look at your own ships, little assassin. See how they fare against the true apex predator." Against her better judgment, Sarah glanced at the tactical display. What she saw made her blood freeze. The human fleet, which had been maintaining formation despite the chaos affecting the Velthak vessels, was beginning to suffer the same fate. Ships were failing, disappearing, or worse, transforming into something that no longer resembled their original configuration. And moving through it all was something that defied description. It was darkness given form, void made solid, a presence so alien and malevolent that simply looking at it caused the mind to recoil in horror. The Devourer feeds on consciousness itself, Zarketh explained. It begins with technology, consuming the ordered patterns of energy and matter that make advanced civilization possible. Then it moves to biological systems, unraveling the delicate quantum processes that maintain life. Finally, it devours thought itself, leaving nothing but empty matter drifting in cold space. Sarah forced herself to look away from the display and focus on the destroyer. Even if what you're saying is true, why should I believe you want to help us? Because, Zarketh said with grim certainty, if humanity falls, the rest of the galaxy will follow within days. Your species may be young, but you possess something the rest of us have lost in our long years of space travel. Creativity born from desperation. If anyone can find a way to stop this thing, it will be humans working from sheer, stubborn refusal to accept defeat. The ship lurched violently as something struck the hull. Through the view screen, Sarah could see tendrils of living darkness wrapping around the endless hunger like grasping fingers. It's found us, Zarketh muttered. No matter. Sarah-chan, I am about to do something no Velthak has ever done before. I'm going to surrender to a weaker species. Before Sarah could respond, the destroyer activated his personal communicator. This is Zarketh the Destroyer, speaking to Admiral Torres of the human fleet. I formally surrender my remaining forces to your command. The threat we face is beyond any single species to handle alone. The response came back immediately, Admiral Torres voice tight with disbelief and suspicion. This is Admiral Torres. Zarketh, if this is some kind of trick dash, it is no trick, Zarketh interrupted. You have 27 minutes before the Devourer reaches Earth. If you want any chance of saving your species, you will accept my surrender and listen what I have to say. There was a long pause before Torres responded. Very well. Zarketh, I accept your surrender. Sarah, if you can hear this, get back to our lines immediately. Sarah looked at the quantum disruptor at her hand, then at the massive alien who had been humanity's greatest enemy just moments ago. Everything in her training told her to pull the trigger, to complete her mission regardless of the circumstances. But everything in her intuition told her that Zarketh was telling the truth. How do I get off the ship, she asked. The docking bay on level 7 has a shuttle prepared for your escape, Zarketh replied. But first take this. He handed her a data crystal that pulsed with internal light. Everything my species knows about the Devourers. It may help your scientists find a weakness. Sarah took the crystal, her mind still reeling from the rapid reversal of everything she thought she knew. Why? Why help us? Because, Zarketh said with something that might have been respect. In 3 centuries of conquest, your species is the first that has made me question whether strength alone is enough. Perhaps it is time for the galaxy's apex predator to learn from his prey. Sarah turned to leave, then paused at the door. What will you do? Zarketh's mandibles clicked in what she now recognized as a bitter laugh. I will do what I have always done, little assassin. I will hunt. The Devourer thinks itself the greatest predator in the universe. It has never faced a Velthak who has nothing left to lose. Sarah ran through the corridors of the dying ship, the data crystal clutched tightly in her hand. Behind her, she could hear Zarketh's voice roaring commands to his remaining crew, organizing a defense against an entity that existed outside their understanding of reality. The shuttle bay was chaos, filled with evacuating Velthak soldiers and the sound of hull metal groaning under impossible stresses. Sarah reached her escape pod just as the first tendrils of darkness began seeping through the bulkheads. As she launched toward the human fleet, she saw the endless hunger beginning its final battle. The massive fortress ship turned to face the approaching darkness, its weapons blazing with defiant fury. For a moment, the ancient evil actually recoiled, surprised by the ferocity of the resistance. But it was only for a moment. The shuttle's quantum communicator crackled to life as Sarah transmitted the data crystal's contents to the human fleet. Dr. Webb, this is Agent Shun. I'm uploading everything the Velthak know about what you've awakened. Please tell me you have a plan to put this thing back where it came from. Dr. Webb's voice came back strained and exhausted. I'm analyzing the data now, but, Sarah, I don't think we can put it back. The quantum breach is too large, too unstable. Once a devourer enters normal space-time, it begins a cascade reaction that feeds on itself. Then what do? We find another way to kill it. The data mentions that devourers are vulnerable to specific quantum frequencies, but generating enough power to affect something that size. His voice trailed off in calculation. On the bridge of the Defiance, Admiral Torres watched the tactical display with growing dread. The entity was moving toward Earth with purposeful intent, and everything they threw at it simply passed through its form without effect. Conventional weapons were useless against something that existed partially outside normal space-time. Ma'am, Lieutenant Shun called from the communication station. We're receiving a transmission from the Velthak command ship. It's Zarketh. Put it through. The screen flickered to show the destroyer's bridge, now half consumed by creeping darkness. Zarketh himself stood at the center of it all, his form beginning to waver as the entity's influence reached him. Admiral Torres, he said, his voice distorting as reality bent around him. I am implementing final protocol. All remaining Velthak vessels will form a defensive perimeter around Earth. We cannot defeat this thing with weapons, but we may be able to buy your scientists enough time to find another solution. Zarketh, your ships are barely functional. This is suicide. Perhaps, the destroyer replied. But better to die fighting than to watch the universe end in darkness. Tell your Dr. Webb that the quantum resonance frequency is 7.23 terahertz. Is the only thing that has ever caused a devourer pain. The transmission cut to static as the endless hunger was finally consumed. But, true to his word, the remaining Velthak vessels moved to surround Earth, creating a barrier of metal and determination between the devourer and humanity's last hope. In his laboratory beneath the lunar surface, Dr. Webb worked feverishly to reconfigure the Prometheus device. The quantum resonance frequency Zarketh had provided was the key, but generating enough power to affect an entity the size of a small moon would require every energy source in the Sol system. Sarah, he called over the communicator, I need you to coordinate with the fleet. Every ship, every power plant, every fusion reactor needs to link into a single network. We're going to turn the entire system into a giant quantum resonance generator. Doctor, Sarah replied from her approaching shuttle. Even if that works, what's to stop this thing from just moving to another system? Nothing, Webb admitted grimly. But if we can hurt it enough, maybe we can make it think twice about staying in our reality. The data suggests that devourers are fundamentally cowards. They only attack prey they're certain they can defeat. As the dark entity approached Earth, consuming Velthak ships like a rising tide of entropy, humanity's greatest minds worked to coordinate the most desperate gambit in their species' history. They had minutes to save not just their world, but the entire galaxy. And somewhere in the quantum foam between realities, other ancient things began to stir, drawn by the scent of weakness and the promise of a universe ripe for consumption. The real battle was about to begin. The quantum resonance network came online with a harmony that defied the chaos surrounding it. Every human ship, every orbital platform, every power generator from Mercury to the outer colonies synchronized their energy outputs into a single, focused beam of reality-warping force. Dr. Webb stood at the center of it all, his hands dancing across controls that pushed the boundaries of known physics. The reconfigured Prometheus device hummed with power that made the air itself glow with impossible colors. Resonance frequency locked at 7.23 terahertz, he announced over the fleet-wide communications. All stations report ready status. Admiral Torres watched the approaching darkness on her tactical display. The Devourer had consumed 3/4 of the Velthak fleet, growing larger and more solid with each ship it devoured. Behind it, Space itself was beginning to unravel, reality becoming a patchwork of contradictory physics. "Fire when ready, Dr. Webb," she commanded. The beam that lanced out from Luna was invisible to normal human senses, but its effect on the Devourer was immediate and dramatic. The ancient entity recoiled as if struck by a physical blow, its form wavering between dimensions. For the first time since it had entered normal space-time, it released what could only be described as a scream. The sound wasn't audible in the vacuum of space, but every conscious being within a light year felt it directly in their minds, a cry of rage and pain that spoke of eons of imprisonment and frustrated hunger. "It's working," Sarah Chun called from her position aboard the rescue shuttle that had picked her up. "The entity is destabilizing." But even as the Devourer writhed under the quantum assault, something else was happening. The distortion in space-time that had allowed it to enter reality was growing larger, and through the widening breach, other shapes were beginning to emerge. "Dr. Webb," Admiral Torres said urgently, "we have a problem. The breach is expanding. There are more of these things trying to get through." Webb's face paled as he saw the readings. "The resonance beam is having an unintended effect. It's not just hurting the Devourer, it's destabilizing the quantum barrier between dimensions. We're making the problem worse." The first Devourer, wounded but far from defeated, began to change tactics. Instead of approaching Earth directly, it spread itself out, becoming a diffuse cloud of malevolent energy that began to surround the entire solar system. The quantum resonance beam, designed to target a concentrated entity, became less effective as its target dispersed. "It's learning," Torres realized with growing dread. "The damn thing is adapting to our weapon." On the bridge of what remained of the Velthak command ship, General Morvac made a decision that would echo through galactic history. The massive stone-like being had survived the destruction of his flagship by transferring to a smaller vessel at the last moment. Now he found himself in command of the destroyer's remaining forces. "All ships," he broadcasted on an open channel, "implement Zarketh's final protocol. Ramming speed." The surviving Velthak vessels, their systems failing and their hulls cracking under quantum stress, turned toward the dispersed Devourer with suicidal intent. They couldn't hurt the entity with conventional weapons, but they could still disrupt its attempts to maintain coherence. One by one, the alien warships plowed into the dark cloud, their antimatter reactors detonating in controlled explosions that sent ripples through the entity's distributed form. Each impact forced the Devourer to concentrate more of itself to maintain stability, making it once again vulnerable to the quantum resonance beam. "Now!" Webb shouted, redirecting the beam to target the areas where the entity was being forced to consolidate. The effect was spectacular. Holes appeared in the Devourer's form where the resonance frequency tore at its quantum structure. But for every wound they inflicted, two more entities were pushing through the expanding breach. Sarah Chun, now aboard Admiral Torres' flagship, stared at the tactical display in growing horror. "How many of these things are there?" "According to the Velthak data," Webb replied grimly, "potentially thousands. They've been trapped in the quantum foam since the early universe. Our breach is giving them all a way back into normal space-time." The second Devourer to emerge was different from the first, smaller but more aggressive, with tendrils of darkness that moved with predatory intelligence. It ignored the human fleet entirely and made straight for Earth, seeming to sense the billions of conscious minds on the planet's surface. "We can't stop them all," Torres said quietly. "Even if we destroy this one, the breach will keep expanding. More will come." It was then that Sarah Chun had an idea so desperate, so insane, that it might actually work. "Dr. Webb, what if we don't try to close the breach? What if we make it bigger?" "Are you insane?" Webb sputtered. "Making it bigger will just let more of them through." "Not bigger here," Sarah explained quickly. "Bigger there, in their dimension. What if we reverse the process? Instead of pulling them into our reality, what if we push our reality into theirs?" Webb's eyes widened as he understood the implications. Create a quantum inversion, turn the breach inside out, but that would require more power than exists in the entire solar system. What about the Devourers themselves? Sarah asked. They're pure energy beings. What if we could tap into their own power and turn against them? The idea was theoretically possible, but practically impossible. It would require someone to establish a direct neural link with one of the entities and somehow convince it to cooperate in its own destruction. It would be suicide, Webb said flatly. The human mind wasn't designed to interface directly with quantum-dimensional entities. Whoever tried it would be consumed instantly. Not necessarily, Sarah replied, her hand moving to a device at her belt. I've been carrying a quantum interface module, standard issue for deep infiltration agents. It's designed to allow mental communication with alien species whose thought patterns are completely foreign to ours. Torres grabbed her arm. Sada, no. We'll find another way. There is no other way, Sarah said gently. Look at the tactical display. We have maybe 10 minutes before Earth is overrun. This is humanity's last chance. Before anyone could stop her, Sarah activated the quantum interface and reached out with her mind toward the first devourer. The contact was like touching the surface of a star with her bare consciousness. The entity's thoughts were alien beyond description, a mixture of ravenous hunger, ancient malice, and something that might have been loneliness after eons of isolation. But beneath it all, Sarah sensed something else, fear. The Devourers weren't the confident apex predators they appear to be. They were refugees, fleeing from something even worse that existed in the depths of the quantum foam. Their aggression was born from desperation, their hunger driven by the need to sustain themselves in a reality that was fundamentally hostile to their existence. You don't belong here, Sarah projected into the entity's consciousness. Nor do you belong in our realm, the Devourer replied, its mental voice like the death of stars. Yet you have opened the way between worlds. Then let's close it, Sarah offered. Together, send your kind back where they belong, and we'll seal the breach behind you. What makes you think we would trust the words of a prey species? Because, Sarah replied with grim determination, I'm about to prove that humans keep their word, even when it costs us everything. She activated a secondary function of her quantum interface, one that had never been tested on a living subject. It would merge her consciousness directly with the Devourers, creating a hybrid entity that could exist in both dimensions simultaneously. The transformation was agony beyond description. Sarah felt her human thoughts being stretched across impossible dimensions, while alien concepts flooded her mind. But somehow, impossibly, she maintained her sense of self. Through her hybrid consciousness, she reached out to Dr. Webb. Do it now. Reverse the quantum polarity and push everything through the breach. Webb hesitated for only a moment before complying. The Prometheus device reconfigured itself one final time, and instead of pulling energy from the quantum foam, it began pushing the entire local space-time continuum toward the dimensional barrier. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The Devourers found themselves being forced back into their own dimension, carried by a wave of human determination made manifest. The breach began to collapse as the two realities separated. But Sarah, her consciousness now partially existing in the quantum foam, was being pulled back with them. You could come with us, the first Devourer offered, its mental voice now tinged with something resembling respect. Exist between dimensions as we do. You would be immortal. No, Sarah replied firmly. I'm human. I belong with my people. With an effort of will that burned away the last of her hybrid nature, Sarah threw herself back toward normal space-time. The shock of re-entering her original dimension was almost enough to destroy her consciousness entirely. But she held on to one final thought. Humanity endures. The breach collapsed with a reality-warping thunderclap that was felt across the galaxy. The Devourers were gone, banished back to their prison in the quantum foam. Space-time began to stabilize as the fundamental forces reasserted their normal patterns. Sarah Chun materialized on the bridge of the Defiance in a burst of quantum energy, her body solid, but her eyes glowing with residual dimensional power. She collapsed immediately, her human nervous system overwhelmed by what it had experienced. "Medical team, to the bridge," Torres shouted, kneeling beside the unconscious agent. As the medical team worked to stabilize Sarah, Admiral Torres looked out at the tactical display. The immediate threat was over, but the cost had been enormous. Of the 400 human ships that had entered the battle, less than 50 remained. The Velthak fleet had been completely destroyed, with only a handful of survivors in escape pods. But Earth was safe. Humanity had survived its greatest test. General Morvac, broadcasting from one of the few remaining Velthak vessels, broke the silence. "Admiral Torres, this is General Morvac of the Velthak Imperial Fleet. I formally surrender all remaining forces under my command to your authority." Torres looked at the massive alien on her screen, seeing in his stone-like features a resignation that spoke of a fundamental change in galactic power structures. "General," she replied carefully, "what are your intentions?" "To serve," Morvac said simply. "Zarketh was right. Strength alone is not enough. Your species has shown us something we had forgotten. That true power comes not from dominance, but from the willingness to sacrifice everything for what you believe in." Over the following days, as the damaged fleets limped back to their respective ports, the galaxy began to process what had happened. The Velthak Empire, which had dominated known space for 3 centuries, formally dissolved itself. Its member species were given the choice of independence or joining a new alliance with humanity at its center. Most chose to join. Sarah Chun recovered from her ordeal, though she was forever changed by her brief existence as a hybrid consciousness. Her eyes retained their quantum glow, and she sometimes spoke of seeing things that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. But she remained fundamentally human, carrying within her the memories of a contact between species that transcended the normal boundaries of reality. Dr. Webb dismantled the Prometheus device, declaring that some doors should never be opened again. But the knowledge gained from the project led to breakthrough advances in quantum technology that would benefit all species in the new galactic alliance. And in the quantum foam that underlies reality, the Devourers waited. They had learned something from their brief contact with humanity, that there existed species in normal space-time that could match their own determination and exceed their capacity for sacrifice. They would be more careful next time, but they would also be more respectful. The galaxy had a new apex predator, one that didn't rule through fear or strength, but through the simple human conviction that some things were worth fighting for, no matter the odds. The age of humanity had begun.